The Israeli government on Monday officially approved the new appointment of Israeli Security Agency Deputy Director Ronen Bar as the new director of the security agency known as the Shin Bet. Bar was approved for the role following some controversy over an anonymous letter sent to the supervising committee accusing him of inappropriate behavior. Though after an investigation could not find any wrongdoing on his part, his nomination was approved and is set to take effect on Thursday, October 14th. Bar, who is 55 years old, is married and the father of 3. He holds a bachelor's degree in political science and philosophy from Tel Aviv University and a master's degree in public administration from Harvard University. He performed his IDF service in the General Staff Reconnaissance Unit and was later recruited to the ISA, where he served in an operational position. In his many years of service on behalf of the security of Israel, he served in and commanded many operations in the Gaza Strip, Judea and Samaria, and Lebanon, and over the years held operations and units that were awarded several security prizes. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett called Bar a, quote, brave fighter and a daring commander who had risked his life for defending the security of Israel more than once. Bennett added that Bar grew within the ranks of the organization and contributed greatly to safeguarding the security of Israel and its citizens. Former Knesset Speaker and former Health Minister Yuli Edelstein announcing on Monday evening that he intends to challenge Likud Chairman and former Prime Minister Binyamin Netanyahu for the party leadership position in a future election. Speaking to Israeli Hebrew News Channel 12, Edelstein said that the Likud will never win with Netanyahu at the helm, and said he believes he would be able to form a new right-wing government to replace the current coalition led by Naftali Bennett. So here to discuss is ILTV reporter Asaf Nissan. Asaf, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for being here.
So what do you make of this announcement? I mean, it's quite a challenge to Netanyahu.
So what we're seeing here is not really a challenge. Edelstein is pretty confident he's not going to surpass Netanyahu. Even the fact that he's going now against Netanyahu in potential primary elections yet again, it's not going forward with the suicide decision of I'm going for it no matter what and I hope to win the first time. He's pretty much realistic of the fact that he might lose, but he's also paving his way for the day after Netanyahu, because rumor has it in the Likud, and even a few members, not outspokenly, but a few members have also talked about the fact that Netanyahu is unsure where he's going to continue now with trials over his head and his career in the future, because he knows that even if he succeeds in taking down Naftali Bennett and the current government, he's not going to have the majority. A lot of them are not willing to sit under him anymore. So that's the real question, is not if Edelstein is going for a suicide run, but how smart is he to plan forward?
So he's planning ahead. He's positioning himself now sort of as the heir to Netanyahu.
Exactly. I mean, unlike Barkat and Israel Katz, of course, who are also high runner-ups in the Likud, who are still waiting on the sidelines right now, Edelstein decided to take the first run and go straight in.
Mm-hmm. And so within the Likud, I mean, so you're saying there's no chance of him outseating Netanyahu. I mean, Netanyahu is the most powerful figure in the Likud right now. But what about his claim that he could be the next prime minister and form a right-wing coalition? I mean, is that realistic? Assuming, the day after Netanyahu.
Of course. The big question is, how will the Likud be after Netanyahu? I mean, rumor has it that if the Likud will lose Netanyahu, on the one hand, they might lose a bit of popularity. But then again, a lot of the voters who went to different camps and different parties, I mean, blue and white, again, can lose its strength because a lot of them are former Likud voters, Yesh Atid, Yamina. Pretty much the political spectrum will be affected by it, and the Likud won't lose that much power. I mean, and giving them enough power again to create kind of a right-wing government. But then again, Edelstein is not yet the most prominent leader, and a lot of it now, thanks to his behavior as Minister of Health during the crisis of the coronavirus, is also debatable. So there's a question, will he succeed more on his personal achievements, whether or not coming from the Likud?
I mean, do you see a scenario in which Prime Minister Naftali Bennett or Yair Lapid, who's destined to become the next Prime Minister, I mean, do you see a scenario in which they will sit under Edelstein?
Well, as far as Naftali Bennett, I wouldn't disqualify it, though yet again, you're right. Having two former prime ministers, because after all, if the rotation will succeed, both of them are going to be prime ministers. Is it going to work? This is a question of also ego. The fact that they're willing to send under someone who wasn't a prime minister and also worked with Bibi and, of course, failed as a health minister. But yet again, according to some reports, of course. But then again, people like Gidon Saar, who left the Likud, would potentially come back, knowing for a fact that if Bibi left the Likud now, there's a good chance he coming back might have even more power than Edelstein and will be potentially able to create a new coalition. And then you would see a bigger potential of either Netanyahu or, not Netanyahu, sorry, Bennett or Lapid sitting under a new prime minister.
All right, never a dull moment in Israeli politics. Asaf Nissan, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you so much.
All right, also on Monday, Jared and Ivanka Trump were in Israel to launch a new initiative in Jerusalem, advancing the Abraham Accords that saw Israel normalize ties with Arab countries, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan. The Israeli Knesset launched the Abraham Accords caucus, which includes over 100 members of Knesset and is led by Ophir Akunis of the Likud Party and Ruth Wasserman Lande of Blue and White Party. Jared Kushner, former senior advisor to U.S. President Donald Trump and a major architect of the Accords, spoke at the event and said that the Accords created a new paradigm in the region, and he called to act to ensure they fulfill their potential. He said that there could be very different outcomes to the Accords depending on the current leader's actions. Since U.S. President Joe Biden took office, no new peace deals have been announced. The Foreign Minister Yair Lapid is set to go to Washington next week to hold trilateral meetings with U.S. and United Arab Emirates officials, in part to discuss expanding the Abraham Accords to include other countries in the Middle East. Now, in other news, the Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center announced on Monday that Iranian hackers were able to access information from Israeli and U.S. defense companies, including those producing military technology, drone technology, satellite systems, and emergency response communication systems, as well as information on maritime and cargo transportation companies with a focus in the Middle East. And so here to discuss the ramifications of this serious breach is Oded Vanunu, Head of Products Vulnerability Research at Checkpoint Software Technologies. Welcome. So jumping right in, first of all, what can you tell us about this Microsoft breach?
So basically, regarding the Microsoft breach, what we know is that hacking groups that was associated or attributed from Iran was trying to perform what we call a brute force to access accounts of Microsoft customers, that these customers are what we call services that provide products and solutions for armies, like we heard. But we need to understand that from a bigger picture, this is not something new. This is not new activity that's going on a daily basis behind the scene on the cyber wars.
I mean, we don't have all the information specifically about this breach, though from what you're saying, I mean, it does sound like a very serious threat, right? The damage has been done. So what does Israel need to do now? What do these companies need to do now to counter this threat or to prevent breaches like this in the future?
So that was like the breach or the attack was against Microsoft infrastructure that providing the services to Israeli customers. So the main problem, the main issue was that Microsoft infrastructure that they were monitoring, trying to attack these customers. So this is like a part. There was no like actual breach or actual vulnerability, but we need to look on this picture like from a bigger perspective. We need to understand that on a daily basis, there are cyber wars between Israel and countries that would like to get intelligent, that would like to get access to intellectual properties. This is part of the game today. We need to understand that conventional wars budget is shifted to cyber wars. Countries have hacking group, illegal hacking group, part of the armies, that what they are doing is that they are creating target objectives to gain intelligence and to gain data for a day of a war. And this is the reality that we live. And of course, we know that Israel has a lot of enemies that would like to get the intellectual property and the information that we have in our economy or in our defense vendors or defense customers. So this is something that happens on a daily basis, and we see it on every day. And I think that from a wake-up call perspective, we need to make sure that our economy and our industry is well protected from these sophisticated attacks that are being executed by countries. which means that they have a lot of resources and a lot of budgets to do that.
All right, Oded Vanunu, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you very much.
Now, Israeli-American economist Joshua Angrist, a professor of economics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, was one of the awardees of the 2021 Nobel Prize in Economics. Hannah Rifkin with the report.
Professor Joshua Angrist, an Israeli-American economist, along with David Card and Guido Imbens, won the 2021 Nobel Prize in Economics for their groundbreaking work using natural experiments to show real-world economic impacts.
The kind of methodological work that Guido Imbens and I focused on over 30 years ago, we started thinking about this, is how to come up with strategies that provide evidence that's as good as the evidence that you would get if you were able to run a randomized trial for something like the effects of charter attendance. And we built, initially, we had sort of an idea, and then that became a framework for the use of statistical and econometric methods that mimic the sort of research design that you would get in a clinical trial without actually having to do the trial. Now, you can't always do that, but often you can do that using natural variation.
Though despite the great honor, Angrist says he had a winding road to success. Angrist was born in Ohio and grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. After receiving his BA in economics from Oberlin College, he dropped out of the Hebrew University graduate program to join the Israel Defense Forces, but later went on to receive a PhD from Princeton and eventually found his way back to the university as a senior lecturer in economics from 1991 to 1995 and associate professor in the economics department from 1995 to 1996. He then returned to the university in 2004 to 2005 as a Lady Davis Fellow. Following his appointment at Hebrew University, he joined MIT, where his work at the institution earned him the Nobel Prize.
It's just the greatest honor a person could have. It's a high point of my life.
In other news, Wednesday marks Aliyah Day, a day that celebrates the contributions of new and old immigrants to the Jewish state. And so joining us now are two Olim, Rabbi Dov Lippman, a former member of Knesset for the Yesh Atid party and the founder of Yad Le'Olim, an organization which helps immigrants navigate Israeli bureaucracy, and Lexi Grant, an Ola, or immigrant to Israel, joining us from Tel Aviv. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So first of all, everyone has their own personal Aliyah story. You know, what brought them to move to Israel and, you know, about the move itself. And so I'm interested in hearing about your stories. Rabbi Lippman, why don't we start with you? Can you tell us about your Aliyah story?
I'll never forget, it was 17 years ago that we picked up, my wife and I and 4 children, and moved to Israel. And I had to call my grandmother to break the news to her. I was so afraid. How do you tell your grandmother that you're picking up and moving thousands of miles away? My grandmother's a Holocaust survivor. She was enjoying the golden years of her life. And I picked up the phone and I called her and I said, Bubby, God willing, this summer, Dina, myself, the children are moving to Israel. And my grandmother responded by saying, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shehechiyanu. She said a blessing, thanking God for bringing us to this day. And that put it all into perspective for me. And I realized, wow, if my grandmother, who's going to miss us terribly, thanks God, now I understand the seriousness and the magnitude and the incredible blessing that we've been given to be able to call Israel our home. And certainly she, as a Holocaust survivor who lost most of her family in the Holocaust, had that perspective. And I want to tell you, that she ended up finding the strength, and she came and she visited me in this building, in the Knesset, in my Knesset office. And she said, Dovela, this doesn't make any sense, but we are blessed to live in the most incredible of times.
It's a great Aliyah story. And Lexi, how about you? When did you move to Israel?
I moved to Israel 10 years ago when I was 18 years old. I decided I wanted a different experience, so I went to the IDC in Herzliya. And I fell in love with the country. I couldn't leave. I tried. I went back to New York for a year, and then I realized that this is my home and I truly belong here and feel the best when I'm in Israel. So I've been here ever since.
Great. Now, you know, Israel is an incredible country, but there is a bit of maybe a cultural shock when you move here. And there are often lots of hurdles to overcome. So I'm just curious, maybe what were some of the difficulties you faced in your move? Lexi, why don't we start with you this time?
Well, definitely the language. I'm pretty fluent now, minus my strong accent, but it's definitely a tough, dealing with the Sabras is not the easiest thing, but honestly, when I've developed thick enough skin that I feel like I can overcome anything here. And it took a few years, but I think the hardest thing was just being able to speak up for myself and how to deal with the chutzpah of Israelis. But at the end of the day, everyone here has a loving heart. Oh my God, sorry. I'm at the hospital and it's pretty loud. But everyone here has kind, giving hearts and is always willing to help. And at the end of the day, we're, a united people, and yeah.
So you mentioned you're at the hospital. What exactly do you do? Why don't you tell us what you do?
I work at Ichilov in the internal medicine unit. I'm at work right now. So I've been working for a year and a half. I was working in the Corona department, and I think that was a big, cultural difference. Not only working with Israelis, but working with Israelis in the hospital who aren't always in the best state, and people are irritable. And, I really, it was a struggle at first, but I really take pride in what I do, and I'm helping Israelis and Jewish people. And it's really an honor to work here.
It's really important work. And Rabbi Lippman, how about you? What are some of the difficulties?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Greatest challenge, without a doubt, was being far away from family, moving away. And that's actually why during this last year and a half of Corona, why myself, together with my new organization, Yad L'Olim, why we've been trying to help reunite Olim with their families. Actually, that's how I met Lexi. Right, Lexi being separated from her family and trying to help her out. That's the greatest challenge. And that's really what I wanted to focus on. Aside from helping people with the bureaucracy, being their voice in the Knesset, even now that I'm not a member anymore, but through Yad L'Olim, but also to help people like Lexi who were here by themselves and enable them to be with their families, because that, for me, was definitely the greatest challenge.
So let's talk about Yad L'Olim for a moment. What exactly does the organization do? How does it help new immigrants and older immigrants?
So we view ourselves, you said it very well in the introduction, actually, Lidar, which is navigating Israeli bureaucracy. There are so many challenges when it comes to whether it's navigating your children in education and health and things along those lines. But even more importantly, having a voice within the Knesset, within the government. We're involved now in all decisions that are being made related to Olim and their families and Corona travel policies. And without having our own political party, which we don't need, everyone can vote for the parties they want, to really be able to be that source of help for Olim, both within the Knesset and the government and throughout Israeli society. And people come to our website at yadolim.org and they reach out for help in a variety of areas, especially right now, Corona travel. And thank God we've been able to help thousands of Olim, like Lexi as one example.
Great. And I'm curious actually, what is one thing that you do love most about living in Israel? We talked about the difficulties, but what are some of the highlights about living in Israel? Lexi, why don't we start with you?
I just love feeling like I'm part of something bigger than myself, and I really feel a part of the nation and the people. Again, in my everyday job, helping people who built the country, I just feel a very strong connection to the religion here and the culture that's my culture. And then it doesn't hurt that I live a 2-minute walk from the beach. I just love it here. I love how when you're at the supermarket on Friday, you get a Shabbat Shalom, or how everything shuts down for major holidays. The food, I love everything about it here.
And Rabbi Lippman, how about you?
Being part of the destiny of the Jewish people. Let's face it, Jewish history is bringing the Jewish people back towards Israel at one time or another. And everyone who's here, no matter what a person is doing, you are playing a role, and you're building a Jewish state in the 21st century, something which our ancestors dreamt of and prayed for 2,000 years. And now we're blessed to be part of it. It infuses every single part of our life, whether it's a pleasant part of your day or a challenging part of your day. It infuses it with meaning and feeling like you're part of something truly special. And that's why on this Yom Aliyah, I certainly call to everyone who's watching to at least explore at least explore the possibility of making Israel your home. It's the most challenging decision to make in your life, and it's the one decision that will be the greatest decision. And in most circumstances, the decision not only you will not regret, but it'll change the future of your entire family for generations to come.
Now, Rabbi Lippman, I see that you're speaking to us from the Knesset. Can you tell us what's happening there? Why are you at the Knesset today?
So it's Yom Aliyah, as you mentioned, and there are various events that are taking place where discussions are taking place about Olim. So, for example, I was in a gathering and I expressed, as a representative of Yad Olim, the voice of Olim, who, the two issues actually. One is during Corona, young children suffered terribly from not having Ulpan, not being taught Hebrew properly because they weren't in school. So we're working very hard with the government to make sure that they increase the hours for those who made Aliyah within the last 2 years. And then also, there are critical decisions being made right now about new entry rules into Israel. And we want to make sure that Olim and their families are heard. And that in these new decisions, while on the one hand, we take care of health concerns, on the other hand, we don't shut people out who need to be able to come and visit their families. I mean, Lexi can describe, if you have a moment, what it was like not to be with her family and what it felt like to be reunited. And that's what we're really working on here on this Yom Aliyah.
Absolutely. Lexi, do you want to jump in and tell us a little bit about your experience this past year?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank Yad Olim and Dov Lippman especially so much. I can't even express my gratitude. Dov was amazing. I mean, I hadn't seen my parents in over a year since before Corona. And being here alone, especially working in the Corona unit, it was very emotionally tolling, especially, being so far away. And Dov I'm forever indebted to him. I mean, he would answer my messages at all times of the day. When I would text him when I'm walking to work at 6 a.m. and I had a question, he was always available, always so kind and patient and understanding. And there were times that I was probably a bit more hysterical than I should have been, but it's so stressful, especially if your parents are flying in 2 days and you still don't know if they're going to be allowed. So Dov truly is doing amazing, amazing work. And I owe so much to Yad Olim, and it's amazing that there are organizations that are helping people like me and so many other Olim who are alone here and a lot of times at different disadvantages, not knowing the language or just there's so many barriers, and so important that we have Yad Olim as an organization.
Absolutely. All right. Rabbi Dov Lippman, Lexi Grant, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today and share your stories.
Thank you. Happy Yom Aliyah to everyone.
Happy Yom Aliyah. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast.
So tonight's calling for possible continued scattered showers throughout the country, lows ranging between 18 to 26 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow, rain supposedly clearing up, leaving us with partly cloudy skies and highs expecting to range between 26 to 34 degrees Celsius. And now let's head back to the studio with Lidar.
And now, before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel.
ביבי, לא ככה. ככה.
All right, well, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.23 shekels to the American dollar and 2.59 shekels to the Canadian dollar. And finally, for the latest updates and news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as to our newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Lidar Gavei-Lazi. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.